Hello everyone, and blessed and happy Holy Thursday to you all. So we begin today the three most holy days of the whole church year, the Paschal Triduum. This is it, folks. This is front and center, stage front, on who Jesus Christ is, the very reason why he came to live among us and became a human being and walked among us, to reveal God in the deepest way to us. And of course, today being Holy Thursday, officially, the Mass that is celebrated today is the Mass of the Lord's Supper. And, going 3+ weeks into all of this quarantine and social distancing, I think today is one of the days in which we're probably feeling, that distance is there. Exactly, precisely because, front and center on the day of Holy Thursday is the Eucharist, the very day, that very moment when Jesus Christ instituted that sacrament which up until relatively recently, I bet we pretty much all just kind of took for granted. Of course we can go to Mass and, receive Holy Communion and adore the Lord in the Blessed Sacrament. I mean, he's been kind of there always since that very first Last Supper, since that very day. But I think what's at play here, and what the Lord is inviting us to here, is to purify ourselves that we may never again take that for granted. Some of you history buffs might have heard the story before of the Christians of Nagasaki in Japan. In the 1600s, there was a flourishing, a vibrant Christian Catholic community in Japan, from the days of the first Jesuit martyr, St. Francis Xavier, and it was a beautiful thing. Until, of course, politics and things being what they were, Christianity was made illegal, the priests were expelled and threatened with death. Christians were being actively persecuted and hunted down. And so, essentially, those people found themselves, obviously in a different circumstance, but sacramentally kind of on the same boat that we're on. They had no access to those sacraments. But did that stop them? No. In fact, for about 200 years or so, they kept the faith alive. Sure, they might not have had this priest there to celebrate the Eucharist so that they could receive the Eucharist, but through baptism, through prayer, those people stayed following the Lord. And was he any less with them? I don't think so. In fact, they probably understood Eucharist even better than we do. There are stories of, in the 1800s, 200 years later, when Japan, under a new government and new policies, opened itself back up to some of these ideas, and priests were once again allowed in, and Christianity was no longer illegal. The people who had, again, we're talking several generations, without the Eucharist, they sought out, they said, when can we have the Eucharist? They weren't receiving it, but they knew what it was. They knew what their hearts longed for. Would that we would be kind of the same. And I think that that's one of the real key and beautiful things to focus on this Holy Thursday in particular. What is my relationship like to the Holy Eucharist? Is it just something that I take for granted? Is it something that I just want to have and possess? And that's why when we hear the readings at Holy Thursday Mass, the Gospel is not the institution of the Eucharist, in other words, Jesus Christ saying, "This is my body, which will be given up for you." We hear from the Gospel of John the story of the washing of the feet, the mandatum. In fact, that's where the kind of old-fashioned, pious, churchy phrase for Holy Thursday, Maundy Thursday, comes from. Mandatum, Maundy, the day in which Christ instituted that commandment of service, of giving himself, which we always have to see in union with the gift of himself in the Eucharist. Because Christ didn't leave himself in the Eucharist to go, "Look at me." Of course, the Eucharist is Jesus Christ, body, blood, soul, and divinity, and so we worship and adore the Eucharist. But if he left us the Eucharist, it's so that he can constantly be with us, to nourish us, to equip us for our task in the world, to serve. When Jesus washes the disciples' feet, there's a whole lot more than just a cute, oh, look how humble Jesus goes and washes their feet. He's shattering false notions for them. He's telling them, all these power trips that you have, all these ideas you think that you're going to be able to control and kind of bring people under your sway, get that out of your head. Why? Because as we know from history, if you look at any kind of person or government that is exerting a force on someone, a person in power doesn't just need people below them over which to exert their power. They need someone above them to kind of justify, well, this is why I'm in power. Historically, we've seen that take all sorts of different disguises. I mean, whatever. In communism, it's, the communist ideal and the rights of the workers. You know, in crazy dictators, you think of Hitler and it's class and race theory and all of these kind of false ideals of, racial purity or whatever. They only do what they do and the barbarities that they do because there's this kind of higher thing that they say, no, this is why we have to do this. That's why when we hear this story of the washing of the feet and Peter's like, Lord, you're not washing my feet. It's his humanity. It's saying, Lord, no. I need you to be that authority figure. I need you. If you lower yourself and do this, what does that mean for me? You put me in charge of these people. How am I going to control them? How am I going to exert some kind of force or power over them if the very source of my power is reversed? In doing this, Christ is saying, get all those ideas out of your head. I'm doing what I'm doing, not to be the greatest, but to show you how to love and to serve in the greatest way that you can. Very few, other than we priests are, celebrating the actual masses this Triduum, are going to actually be able to receive the Eucharist. But that doesn't mean that we can't receive Christ and receive what he is teaching us. Since those days of the Last Supper, the question that all of us have to ask ourselves this Holy Thursday and forever, I think, until the rest of our lives, is why do I seek out Jesus in the Eucharist? Do I have him? Do I seek just to have him? Or do I seek to love him? Because, if I just want him, my Jesus, it's like, you've seen Finding Nemo and, there's that aquarium of misfit fish and there's the one fish that there's the treasure chest with the bubbles coming out and he's like, no, my bubbles. Every time it opens up and the bubbles come up, my bubbles. Trapping, controlling, grabbing, possessing. Is that my mindset? I want to get Jesus? Or do I want to love him? Do I want to adore him? That's the difference. Otherwise, if all I'm seeking is just to have and satisfy that desire, folks, we're just pious versions of Kathy Bates in Misery. Control, my Jesus. You're not going anywhere. But I think that the Lord is giving us these days as a special invitation to not have Jesus, to not grab Jesus, to not possess Jesus, but to understand him and love him in the deepest way that we've ever done. We're not being asked, I don't think, to spend 200 years or several lifetimes without him. We're going to hopefully just at the most, couple weeks, months, at the very most, to have to keep going this way. But that doesn't mean that our hearts can't grow more deeply in love with him, so that when we finally do come back and we receive Jesus Christ himself again, it won't be so much for ourselves as much as for love of him and for the love of the people that the Lord is sending into each and every one of our lives to serve and to love. My prayers and the prayers of all of us here at Epiphany are with you as we begin these most sacred days of the year. May the Lord Jesus Christ give you the strength and the love to always seek him for the right reasons. God bless you.